Lawmakers are looking to move some money to help secure shelters for homeless people in Jefferson County. The full county board does still need to vote on that funding, but 7 News reporter Sandy Torres tells us how it would be used.
Jefferson County is planning to use $820,000 to continue its efforts to help homeless people. Tuesday night, the Health and Human Services Committee passed a resolution to allocate these ARPA funds toward keeping people off the street. Director of Housing Jillian Redder says the money has not officially been moved, but if it is, it will fund a twofold project. The first part, to purchase an emergency response trailer. Redder says this will be used in case of an emergency where several people are displaced, like what happened at 661 Factory Street in 2021 when the building was condemned. With nowhere to go, residents had to live in tents outside.
The intention would be to meet their immediate needs for, a couple days until some more permanent solutions could be brought together for them.
The emergency response trailer will be equipped to help around 50 people for several days. The second part of the plan, to bring in a pallet shelter. The county is hoping for a temporary sleeping shelter of 20 units.
Location yet has not been determined. We are looking at the various options. We realize that transportation is one of the major barriers. Regardless of where the location is, transportation will certainly be in the mix.
Some that are facing homelessness say the pallet shelter is a great idea, but hope it's fit for North Country weather.
Warm enough in the winter, cool enough in the summer. For any inclement weather we get, it would have to be something that would hold up.
Ryder says the pallet shelter will be able to handle our weather. She says the emergency pod trailer will likely arrive first, with the pallet shelter arriving sometime in 2025. Sandy Torres, 7 News.